Welcome to the Paradigm Shift on 4ZZZ 102.1, where we challenge the assumptions of our current society to resist depression and investigate alternative ways of living, for a world based on justice, solidarity and sustainability. Welcome to the Paradigm Shift on 4ZZZ 102.1 FM. It's your local community radio station. For the last 48 years and 1 week, we've been providing the independent news and music and community coverage to support the city where we live. My name's Andy and I'll be with you for the next hour, broadcasting on Jagera and Turrbal country, and of course everywhere online. Wherever you're listening, it's worth thinking about who was living in the place where you were before you came along, and indeed who will be afterwards as well. Today on the show, I'm going to be speaking with Violet Coco and Colette Harmsen. They're two women who have been very busy in recent years in environmental direct action. Violet mostly in Victoria and then around the country, blockading roads as part of a kind of originally Extinction Rebellion and then other kind of groups, but these same tactics of doing urban actions to try to disrupt everyday life to bring attention to the climate emergency. Colette's been based in Tasmania and has been mostly out in the forests trying to stop these forests being logged, or in the case of Takaina, trying to stop a coal mine being built there and other mines. And both of them have a lot of experience. They've done a lot of dramatic actions, and in the last year, both of them have also had the experience of being sent to prison. Colette did a 3-month prison stint from July until October of this year, and Violet Coco gained a lot of media attention when last December she was sentenced to 15 months in prison. It was later overturned on appeal, and she was given a suspended prison sentence instead. But through the course of today's show, we are going to talk about direct action for the planet, the value of it and the kind of philosophy behind it. We'll talk about the experiences of prison and of house arrest, which both of them have experienced as well. And we'll talk a bit about what the future looks like now that the state's been trying to shut these two women down, what they're planning on doing. Spoiler alert, they're not planning on being shut down, but we'll hear more about that through the course of the show. It was great to have a chat to both of them, and I don't often, actually, on the Paradigm Shift, do interviews where there's 3 of us all chatting together, and so that was quite fun as well. Hopefully you'll enjoy listening to it. I'm going to get into it now, talking to Violet and Colette.
Hi, I'm Violet Coco, and I'm here talking about our right to protest. I was one of the first activists sentenced to prison under the new 144G laws in New South Wales that were rushed through Parliament.
Hi, I'm Colette Harmsen. I'm a forest activist from Tasmania, and I have a special interest in wildlife and preserving wildlife habitat.
All right, and we're going to be talking about environmental direct action and about doing environmental direct action even when it ends with you in prison, which it has for both of you in the last year or so. So I'm very looking forward to delving into some of these topics. But Yeah, I guess to start off with, let's talk about the kind of direct action that you do and what it means to you doing environmental direct action.
Yeah, for me, I guess I've been doing direct action for about 5 years now, and it all began with really understanding how much danger we're in on our current trajectory, that we risk the collapse of our livable planet, and that billions of lives could be lost, and the collapse of our civilization. And I thought that was really scary, and I was hoping that there would be more leadership in this area, but it seems that instead of sort of stopping emissions, our leaders continue to expand and create new fossil fuel projects and destroy forests. And so, yeah, I learn about civil resistance, which is a way when I guess governments fail to lead the people in a direction that is just. A small selection of the population rise up and engage in acts of I guess being naughty. In Colette's case, it's blocking the forest, stopping logging, and in my case, it's taking that fight to the cities and blocking roads to kind of draw attention to the fact that people's lives are in danger, and that there isn't the political will to be shifting that in a way that is going to keep our community safe. So mostly I participate in the kind of actions that stop traffic. I have done a few office occupations. I have blockaded the forest, but most of my time has been spent on, I guess, talking to ordinary people by stopping their day and engaging them in a conversation that I feel like they need to have, even though sometimes they don't want to have it, which can be quite difficult.
What about you, Colette? What is it that you do and why take direct action?
Well, I'm a full-time activist now in Tasmania, and I used to be a veterinarian. I studied veterinary science at the University of Queensland, and I hoped that by learning about it I could help a little bit with the suffering of our wildlife, and also help inform the government and people making the decisions that what they were doing was actually really threatening a lot of species. But what I became quickly aware about was that basically the science was being ignored, and pretty incensed at the lack of action by our governments, and then the way that they're complicit in the destruction of our fragile environments, and also supported wholeheartedly by the legal system. And when I was last in court, the magistrate told me that I was giving my middle finger to the judicial system, which is a bit ridiculous when you compare it to the middle finger that the judicial system is giving to the entire climate emergency.
So, yeah, I guess in terms of movements for change, there's lots of different spheres to them and lots of different ways that people can be active in trying to protect the environment. And you two have both chosen direct action, arrestable civil disobedience, and to do it in a sort of repeated way. What led you to choose that rather than other parts of the movement? And I guess, how do you think they all fit together?
I'm particularly keen on the direct action side of things. I believe that's where we can instigate some really important change, because we're out in the public eye and we're, right in the face of people, and the government has a bit more trouble ignoring us when we're right there in their faces. But I believe that we need all the tools in the toolbox. We need people writing letters and going to rallies and phoning into the radio stations, and the whole spectrum of action that can help, I guess, buoy people up and make them more more empowered to take better action and more, maybe even dip their toe into direct action, get outside their little comfort bubble.
Yeah, I think it's about appropriate response. We've tried letter writing, and we've tried one-day marches, and we've tried lobbying, and basically we haven't been listened to. And this is about using unignorable tactics in an emergency situation where lives are at stake. And I don't think that signing a petition or getting a bamboo toothbrush is an appropriate response to the collapse of our livable planet. I understand that, we have to bring people along. An Overton window is just like the acceptable response to a thing. Otherwise, you seem crazy for doing this stuff. And so, we try and bring people along by flexing their courage muscle of signing those petitions and doing those one-day marches to help build the movement. Those are all valid tactics because they're movement building. But at the end of the day, I don't think that they're the appropriate response to the threat that we face. And ultimately, what we're trying to do in those actions is motivate people into their courage, into taking action that's going to achieve change. Because if we don't do enough in the current situation, it's not like we can try again in 3 or 4 years. We're at the end. This is where we're tipping from global warming into global boiling. So if we don't have enough people using unignorable tactics immediately, then we could just party like there's no tomorrow.
Violet, you come from a kind of Extinction Rebellion tradition of these actions blocking public roads in urban areas, very high visibility, whereas Colette, you act in a sort of different protest tradition of going out to forests and locking yourself to the physical machinery that is cutting down these forests. I wonder if you could both reflect a bit on these different traditions, maybe how they're different and how they work together.
Well, I just have so much respect for the people who are on the front line of stopping the actual death machine, getting in the way of the logging or the mining equipment, preventing just one extra day, with their body. That's all you've got at this point in such a failure of leadership, is to stop the death machine with your body. And I think it's such an important part of what we're doing, but ultimately it isn't generating enough momentum politically. We have to hold power and have conversations outside of just blocking the fossil fuel industry or blocking the logging, because that conversation is only with the industry that's engaging in that destruction and extractivism. It's not engaging in a political, platform. It's a delay tactic. And so that's why I think it's important that we're taking our protests from out of the forests and into the streets. That's what our democracy needs. And so, it's about holding power in such an intense situation. So I think that's the main difference. What do you think, Colette?
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. Another thing is with the forest actions, we're out trying to demonstrate that there's illegal logging going on. So what is perceived to be the business as usual Forestry Tasmania approach, a lot of the time they are logging in areas where there are swift parrots nesting and things like that, and so far they seem to have gotten away with wide-scale logging of those areas where swift parrots and other endangered species are heavily reliant. And I think just going out there and saying this is illegal logging, you can't be doing that, to send a message to, I guess, the government, the logging industry, but also politicians, and also with social media to the larger community.
It's so hard to get media, though, doing those actions out there, isn't it, Colette? Like, the difference between blocking a major freeway in terms of the attention that you get and blocking in the forest is it's heartbreaking, because you want to bring the attention to the fact that the swift parrots are disappearing, and as someone even doing office occupations in cities where the media doesn't even have to travel an hour to get there, it's still really hard to get attention unless you're being disruptive to people. It's unfortunate, but that's what I found.
Yeah, that's so true. And even in Tassie, when we go into, say, Forestry Tasmania's office and cause a disruption there, the mainstream media aren't really interested. So yeah, I mean, we just need more people, more enthusiasm, more direct action.
And now both of you have done these kind of non-violent direct actions and obviously been part of movements that organise, but also as individuals done them repeatedly to a point where, both of you have been sentenced to prison. Colette, you served yours while it was overturned, but still a suspended prison sentence. But I guess I want to know the thinking behind that, of just doing repeated actions to the point where, became possible or likely that you would be sent to prison. What's the theory behind that?
I guess there are a lot of people getting arrested, and like we talked about, the people are ignoring the situation. So for me, I felt like ramping it up a little bit, and because I don't have big commitments in my life right now, I thought it was okay for me at this point in time to keep pushing until I did receive a jail term, because to demonstrate just the ludicrousy of it. And while I was in jail, the other inmates just thought it was the strangest thing that a peaceful forest protester would get sentenced to a jail term, especially given that everybody knows that there's a climate emergency going on.
Yeah, I did come from a strategic position of studying movements in the past that have been successful in using civil resistance as a tactic to shift political will, and I noticed that I guess no movement had really done it without people going to prison, and so I felt like, to me it was sort of a math equation of, well, if we're being annoying enough that they're going to try and fight us, this industrial complex that has perpetuated the fossil fuel industry has already murdered plenty of people. I'm sure that they would, if I was being annoying enough, that they would send me to prison. And this is a conversation I was sort of having 3 to 5 years ago. And then and so, yeah, much like Colette, it was like, well, the appropriate response is to engage in civil resistance until the point where they are sending us to prison. At the time when I sort of decided to take that strategy, I was looking at starting a family and realised that that wasn't a trajectory that I could take if I was going to be an activist in this way. And so myself, like many other young people or people around my age, are sort of making this decision not to have kids in fear of what is going on with the climate emergency, and wanting to, be able to provide their time to protecting the kids that are already here. So I just set myself full time on this path of engaging in civil resistance and mobilizing, and in a way accepting that they would put me in prison as a trajectory gave me the power to be courageous enough to do the actions like the burning pram and all these other things that have led me to 35 arrests now for the climate and ecological emergency.
In some ways, for both of you, making a conscious decision to do that, it's, risking your sort of liberty and certainly your comfort, but also it is kind of putting yourself out there as a kind of public figure in quite a contested public space where not everybody's likely to be on your side. How did you feel about that, putting yourself out there, and how has that experience been?
Well, I think, again, looking through history, the suffragettes were not liked. Even Martin Luther King wasn't liked by certain people. It was I knew that being effective wasn't necessarily, the same as being liked. I'm not trying to be a politician. I'm not trying to get elected. I'm just trying to sound the alarm. And I know what people do to alarm clocks when they wake them up from a heavy sleep. And I guess I'm prepared to be that. I'm prepared to walk that path if it means saving lives. And it's been really intense. A sort of shocking moment for me was when Sky News had an entire 20-minute panel on how shit I am or whatever, and things like that. But also the support. Obviously, there's so many people who are so grateful for what we're doing, who understand, and that support has been overwhelming, and it's a real honour to actually be here and be doing this and be so connected and know so many people throughout the movement. And I'm looking forward to the point at which there are so many of us who are willing to be this courageous that we become anonymous again.
What about you, Colette?
Yeah, I like that last idea that Violet Coco just shared, but I think if people don't like what we're doing, I think that probably means that we're being effective, because we're not taking on the popular jobs and growth and everybody's going to have a house and a car and fuel forever. We're fighting that narrative and kind of talking about a space where we need to change a lot of things really fast, and the fact that people take a lot of dislike in people who are pushing for that means that there must be something in it, I think. And I look at Bob Brown and how many people just hate him with a vengeance. Like they come, I hate that guy, and it just blows me away. But it also makes me think that he must be very effective to have that many people frustrated with what he's doing.
Well, I think we're at that point in the conversation where we talk about going to prison. Obviously, it's not something that we generally grow up thinking that we'll do or think is a goal in life or something. And I guess there's a lot of fear around prison, and that's the point of prison. So I'm interested in talking about your experiences of it. Maybe we'll start with Colette to talk about what was the experience of prison and the court system and everything actually like?
Yeah, I guess I really never thought I'd end up in prison. Being introduced to the legal system and the magistrates' courts and having a lot to do with police and that sort of thing, it really opens your eyes up to the way these systems operate. And I guess being in prison itself, for me, was not a negative experience. I enjoyed the company of the other inmates and made a lot of friends, and I guess the magistrate actually said quite publicly that he hoped I'd learn my lesson by going to prison for 3 months. But I think if anything, it's given me more resolve to keep doing what we're doing in order to make a better, safer, more friendly planet.
What about you, Violet?
Yeah, so I've actually been to prison 4 times. It's not well known, but we did a whole campaign around the jail, not bail, not signing bail conditions that prohibited us from protesting. And so, I've spent still not as much time as Colette, but I've been to a few different prisons for a few short stints, and it's an awful system. And something that's really clear is that when you're in there, you realise that the women in there mostly just need help. And that's what they are asking for. A lot of them are asking for more support services, some more mental health support services, and they're not getting it in there. And so to witness the system of injustice on the inside further deepens my commitment and resolve to shifting our system and creating a world where there's more justice for all members of our community. In saying that, though, I think one of the things that prison does is it dehumanizes you. It separates you from the people that you love. And that's also what happened with this whole case. I was also on 4 months of house arrest. And so the greatest weapon of the state when it comes to stopping activists, they call it strategic incapacitation. So the police actually, have strategies in place to incapacitate protesters to limit our effectiveness in democracy. And they do that with psychological trauma of separating us from our loved ones, from making us feel fear, having high cortisol levels, their whole uniform, the whole process of going to court, and this person who sits above you and judges you for trying to protect the world. And so when their greatest weapon is separation, we have to hold close in our hearts that our greatest strength is to be connected with each other and to be learning to work together. And so I like Colette, experiencing the system only strengthened my resolve that we need to be working together and reaching across this beautiful continent and globe of ours to unite our voices against the fossil fuel industry, against the military industrial complex, against extractivism and colonialism, and create a great turning into a world where we have a livable trajectory.
Like you mentioned there, Violet, prison does isolate people, and that's part of its aim. And that's why activist movements have often put a lot of work and effort into prisoner solidarity. I'm wondering if you felt isolated or if you felt solidarity while you were on the inside or in the system, and what difference that solidarity made.
Yeah, I mean, like Violet just said, the strategic incapacitation is a really severe thing, and my isolation was felt most when I spent about a year and a half. I wasn't allowed to go more than 30 k's from my home, and for part of that time I had to be in my home between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. and it really did. I felt very isolated and incapacitated by that because I couldn't attend things, I couldn't visit friends. I had to be home in bed at a certain time, and the police would come and knock on the door of my caravan and make me show my face so they knew that I was actually there. And that was really, really isolating compared to my experience in prison, where I had the great support of the Bob Brown Foundation behind me, and Violet, Coco, and all the people that encouraged people to write letters to me, which was really a really lovely and warm way to support someone in that situation where you can't just pick up the phone or check someone on Facebook and that sort of thing. So the solidarity of the groups that you're part of can make or break you.
I think what I'm really hearing is that prison, it's this big sort of flashy word that the media can latch onto, but before you get sentenced to prison, there's a whole lot of activists at the moment, not just Colette and I, who are experiencing this strategic incapacitation through bail conditions. I think that's the real injustice going on here, and that we need to expose. And those bail conditions are like quasi-house arrest, police checkups, having to report to the police station, all that sort of stuff. And I think that's definitely the hardest part to get through. And that's part of the reason how Colette and I found each other, is that, maybe the movement was still sort of catching up on how to take care of each other in those situations. But as soon as I was put into house arrest, Colette obviously already had that experience and was able to reach out to me, and we became friends through that. So, I think as hard as it is, we all have to have our own fortitude when going through the repression. It is difficult, but if you reach out, the connection and the community is there to support. And I know I felt that, and especially with you, Colette. Thank you so much for calling me up. Really appreciate it.
That's okay, Violet. I'm just really pleased that we found each other and could support each other and hopefully spread that kind of community and compassion, but also passion.
That's really great to hear, and a really inspiring reminder. I think particularly we talked about, I guess, movements and the roles for different people. And I think for people who do believe in direct action, bold, in their face direct action, but maybe aren't able to do it for time commitments, family, whatever, health, that actually solidarity is a really valuable role as well.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I always say for every one person being arrested, there's a support team of 10 to 20 people around them who are doing that work of, the regenerative culture, the legal work, the media, all that sort of stuff. And, you just really couldn't do it without that support and that network. So even if you can't be on the front line, there's plenty of people who can't do exactly the role that Colette or I do, but there are plenty of ways to support people like us doing them. And even just being in the room, sometimes we're about to do something super courageous and are full of fear, and there's only 5 of us in the room planning to do it, and having that one extra body just around being like, yeah, you can do this, can make all of the difference. Even if that's all you're doing is being a cheerleader, come along, turn up to the meetings.
Yeah, I agree with that. Also, the importance of the other roles. We always tell people that, you never have to get arrested if you don't want to. But what often happens is people take on roles that are, essential for any action, and they start understanding the system and the way the legal why the police work and that sort of thing, and then suddenly they're like, I want to do it, and it becomes something that they're able to take on as well, just by joining in and finding out more about what happens.
Now, both of you have been in contexts like many people across Australia have in recent years, actually, where governments have brought in new laws specifically targeted at environmental protesters. In New South Wales, there's obviously the Main Roads Law, which, Violet, you broke. But also in Tasmania, after a long time of trying to bring it through, they got through a kind of aggravated trespass law. I'm interested in hearing your thoughts on how to deal with these kind of repressive laws, what kind of things we need to be doing in the face of that government targeting and repression.
I guess that comment reminds me of what some of the magistrates in London courts are doing, and they're saying, these people are our future, and they're standing up for the future of our planet, and they're choosing not to apply the really harsh conditions that they could apply if they wanted to. So I think there's a chance that, the legal system might catch up and might stop giving their middle finger to the entire climate emergency, and maybe understand that they can have a role, by not giving us the harsh laws that are imposed. In Tasmania, we have the aggravated trespass. It basically gives the magistrate the ability to give higher charges for offences, but also, impose those, bail conditions and good behaviour bonds and suspended sentences and even jail terms that are a lot harsher than they have been in the past. And we're seeing them starting to charge people a lot more for pretty simple acts of civil disobedience, and I think maybe we can educate them to try and be sympathetic to the saving of the planet rather than protecting big business.
Yeah, well, I say flood the courts, fill the prisons. I think the fact that they are legislating to shut us down is a sign that activists are being loud and are starting to be loud enough. Australia is the 3rd largest exporter of carbon emissions. We have an incredible responsibility here to stop being the drug dealers of fossil fuel industry around the world. And we have so much privilege here, and it's very doable for many people to engage in civil resistance, and being afraid is not the end of the conversation with yourself. In fact, courage comes from feeling your fear first and then stepping into it anyway. And there are many people who are vulnerable parties who, even though they have a dignity of risk to make that decision for themselves, obviously would not be the first people that I would encourage to step onto the front line. But there are many people who do have a lot of privilege and can step into that position, especially, your first one, you tend to get a no conviction, not always, but you do tend to get a no conviction, no penalty for your first one. Anyway, I think if you any kind of sort of regular Joe person, then give it a go and stand in civil resistance against the murder of our planet.
I mean, you two have been at the kind of pointy end of state repression, with both, dealing with new laws being created and then prison and media and whatever. Has it slowed you down?
Since my sentence in prison, I currently have a 6-month suspended prison term. So I'm very involved in the forest actions and other direct action in Tasmania. I'm just at this point in time avoiding getting arrested, because that would be a 6-month jail term that maybe I can save up for a time when it will make more of a difference.
I think that's really strategic, Colette. There are times when we step into resistance and there are times when we step back. And while I was, after the Harbour Bridge, as I said, I was sort of on a quasi-house arrest for quite a few months, and I definitely slowed down at that point. I would consider myself having been in a burnout state where I really couldn't do much at all. And I think, it's really important to acknowledge that a lot of people who do this work do reach a point of burnout, because it seems so important, and obviously it is so important, and that's why we just keep going, and those that care keep giving and keep giving and keep giving, and find it really hard to find boundaries. But we do need to set boundaries and care for ourselves and engage a regenerative culture and keep each other in check about that. And, some days I'm better at that and some days I'm not as good at that. But in terms of slowing down on a macro scale rather than a micro scale, I feel like right now things are actually gearing up rather than slowing down. And even though, some of us, aren't exactly, Colette's not sitting there locking on. I know that Colette's doing other things that support other people doing that work. And that's what's important, is that right now on the front line of civil resistance, more and more people are being engaged. I can see the movements reconnecting and regrowing after lockdowns. And I'm really excited because, it's building, and that's exactly what we need right now.
Yeah, I think it's an important point about self-care, because burnout, it happens to a lot of people, and it's debilitating, and it can cause people to walk away for good because they have such a negative experience with it. And I think, don't feel guilty about taking some time out. Don't feel guilty if you need to lie in bed all day and just not think about anything, because you can only be as effective as the energy you've got ready to put into it.
I would like noted that we're not slowing down because of state repression. We're slowing down because of our own goddamn too much commitment and love for this project and this planet. We're not here being I'm really afraid of the police, so I'm going to stop doing it. No, we're I just keep doing too much work, actually, and that's the only thing that might slow me down sometime.
Oh yeah, they do slow down. They got a bit of power, don't they? They do. It does get to you a bit, the repression and things like that. But that's right. We've got to work through it.
No, you're right. It does. It does affect you, and they're designed to do that. But as a whole, I think when police use hyper-repressive tactics on people, it engages what's called the backfire effect and causes more people to be outraged at the system and is mobilizing. And that's part of the strategy around continuing to engage in civil resistance to the point of prison, is that, you know, it does make people outraged because they don't think that it's fair that people who are protecting the environment are put in prison, and so it highlights that. And maybe they can't see that with the house arrest and they can't see that with the bail conditions, but prison is something that they can understand. And so that's why when I went to prison, you know, we saw the largest protests around this country since the COVID pandemic had started. Like, it was sort of kicked things back into gear, and that's the backfire effect coming into play.
Both of you being women in this space of like direct action, often physical confrontation, and all kinds of things, I guess, where women's experience is different to men. I'm interested in asking about that, how you think it's different being women in these spaces than it might be for being men.
From my experience talking to the other inmates at the Mary Hutchinson's women's prison at Risdon, definitely there was a sense of community with the other women inmates, that hearing stories about the men's prison, which is right next door, I think probably isn't as evident in there. And, you know, there was a bit of solidarity and people weren't afraid to, you know, show their emotions and cry and hug and things like that. And from what I can understand, that's not as forthcoming in the men's prison. So I think in that way, being a woman in the women's prison, at least in Tasmania, has some positive attributes that maybe don't exist elsewhere.
Yeah, I remember when I first joined the climate movement just being so shocked and in awe and excited and happy about how many powerful women were around. You know, it's really mind-blowing. I was like, oh my God, here they all are. This is where all the women have been. And it's not a surprise to me, because this work is really hard work, and women are often, you know, take on the dirty labour of the community, and you know, that is a lot what this is. It's highly sacrificial. It takes so much time. It's hard. It's facing oppression. Requires a lot of community building and connection and collaboration, which has all been essentially women's work for a long time. That community building stuff. And I'm not saying it should be, I'm just saying that has definitely been put in our basket. And so, yeah, I think that it's really important that women's voices are centred in the climate movement, and especially women of colour, because, you know, they are the ones that are going to experience climate breakdown the hardest and the first. And so when resources become scarce, fascism arises, and people of colour and women lose rights. And so, yeah, I think it's only right that it is the women that are standing up and engaging each other and finding ways to create a better world together.
All right. Well, to finish off with, I guess let's talk about what's next. It's been a big 2023 for both of you. Looking into the future, what does your actions to try to protect the planet look like?
I guess what I'm really looking forward to in the hopefully very near future is an end to native forest logging in Tasmania and around Australia, and I will heavily campaign towards that, and also the Tarkine area that is so absolutely mind-blowingly beautiful rainforest. I'd like to see a national park there as soon as possible to protect some of that absolutely amazing forest.
For me, I'm coming to Tasmania over January to have a little protection of Tarkine as well. I think it's so important. I've been to that space and that ecosystem, and it is just gorgeous, and to flood it with the off water of a mine is just it's just a crime. It's absolute crime. So we'll be heading over there, and then in March, Extinction Rebellion are hitting the streets again in Melbourne, Naarm. the reason I mobilised with Extinction Rebellion is because they seem to be the only ones on the street who have a really robust theory of change to fix our democracy, and that's with citizens' assemblies. So check out ozrebellion.earth to get involved with Extinction Rebellion. And I am championing a national action series on May the 4th. May the 4th be with you, Rebels Rising. It's going to be superheroes, cosplay for climate, superheroes blocking roads. Yeah, I just really can't wait to have a really fun and silly day in costumes, engaging in protecting the planet in every city around the continent. And then I know that also on the calendar is Rising Tides doing 10 days of action blocking the coal port in November as well. So I'll definitely be participating in that.
Yeah, I would also like to mention that there will be some forest marches, I think, all around Australia in March.
March for March.
Yeah, March for March. The Bob Brown Foundation will have information about that on the website or the Facebook site.
All right. Well, thanks very much for taking the time to chat with us, Violet and Colette.
Thanks for having us on, Andy. It's been really fun.
Thanks, Andy.
Violet Coco and Colette Harmsen there. Both of them. It's been a big year, 2023, of courts, prison, public, being in the public spotlight, and also trying to keep the focus on the environmental crisis that we're currently living through, that's one that's living out in the forest but also in our atmosphere as the only more and more greenhouse gases get emitted. And it was really great talking to both of them about what they do. Really amazing ultimately to hear the joy and passion that came from both of them despite everything, all the hard work that is involved in what they do. And I hope it has been illuminating for you and also inspiring, because let's face it, our environment needs all the help it can get. And so those two there, they're doing their best, but there's plenty of opportunities for other people to get involved in the movement for change. There's all different roles you can play. And so let's make 2024 a big year of trying to fix some of the problems with this system that we live in. That is about all we have time for in the Paradigm Shift. I'll be back in 2024. I'll keep trying to bring you the news of people trying to create change from your local neighbourhoods around the country and around the world. And so I hope you keep tuning in. I'll see you next week.